dive right into 3 and or YRFI plays. If you're new to the video, we do 3. We let you know if we like the yes or no run first inning plays. You let us know what you think on the chat. Always open with the comments. Love, like, hey, our buddy Dave is always lurking, so you never know who's out there. We appreciate the good, the bad, the ugly. All we ask in return, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and make sure you hit the notification bell, because a lot of times we do these early lines move, especially away, not in your favor, so you want to jump in ahead of time, and that's the easy way, the notification bell. Yes, we're going to go right to BetMGM. You can see the first play up there. Also want to remind you that we have this fantastic offer still live at BetMGM. $10 going to win you $200 free. I'll tell you about that. But again, it's just hammer that link, keep going, keep going. Even if you have and you know people who haven't, you can be the good friend. You could be the good husband, the good wife, the good mom, the good dad, the good son, the good daughter. You can be the good everything, right? Like the opposite of the Seinfeld bit. The bad tipper, the bad boyfriend, right? The bad guy. Well, you can be the good person in this case, and remind everybody about that link. All right, first play up on the board. Phillies, Marlins, no run first inning. No RFI at -110. I don't think this moves. I think we're locked in here. I'd be shocked if it did. Rangers, Suarez on the hill. And, the Phillies are still looking to secure a wild card spot. There is a lot of pressure, a lot of tightness on them following that brutal loss to the Marlins. Suarez trying to keep this scoreless streak alive in the first inning, specifically for us on the road. Suarez, 8 straight starts on the road for Rangers. Suarez, where he's failed to give up or surrendered. Failed, right? That sounds like a negative connotation. Where he has yet to surrender a first inning run. So now they're in Atlanta. Okay. All of a sudden, the Braves, you would think, right? Hot Braves, trying to keep pace with the New York Mets, maybe even win this NL East. Well, let's look at the numbers, because you've got 8 straight starts for Suarez where he's failed to give up a run. I keep saying failed, like that's again a bad thing. He has yet to give up a run in the first inning. The Braves are one of baseball's worst teams. They average just 0.42 runs per first inning at home. That's it. They're tied for 4th worst in baseball. So Max Fried, on the other hand, gets to go up against the Phillies team. Yeah, they come off that loss to Miami. Don't expect any major bounce back right away. This isn't the NFL. Look at this. The Phillies, futile, only average 0.31 runs per first inning on the road. That's it. It's just not good. Neither one of these teams are good in their respective spots offensively. Both are going up against, on the other side, good pitching. If it's Fried, which is just a great season for him overall, to Suarez, who has been outstanding in this spot on the road in the first inning. So let me tell you again about BetMGM, what's happening here. It's a simple process. All you need to do is just click that link below. That's it. Just click the link. We're removing extra steps for you. Just click the link. Now, when you click that link, you can sign up, deposit whatever you want. That's fine. Just bet $10 and you're going to win $200 free. Free, like all caps free. Did you see that? No strings attached, stuff like that. You're not waiting a week like at other books for this money to come back and sweating or hitting up customer service for 6 straight days like, where's this $200 free? It's right back into your account. I'd say bang like that, but then Mike Breen might sue me. So just know that you don't have to. Breen's actually a really good guy who wouldn't sue. You wouldn't have to wait. You wouldn't have to wait 4 days, 5 days. A lot of these books have this stuff out there, and then there's this asterisk or fine print where it's like, come on, man, where's this $200? That's the biggest selling point that I think I can hit you with, is that you're not waiting. I mean, look, the $10 turns to $200 free. I shouldn't really have to sell that for you. I'm just telling you what this deal is, and pretty much you're a moron if you're eligible to take advantage of this, and you have yet to take advantage of this. I think that's on you more so than anything else. I mean, look, we're giving you free picks. We're giving you free content. Not say that they always hit or don't always hit, but we're giving you this information free. You might as well.
Good morning, everybody. It is time for the Stokastic MLB Strategy Show, and this one is going to be jam-packed with a lot of information in a short amount of time because we have 14 games to talk about, and we have to be out here pretty early also because there's a lot of stuff going on the YouTube channel and, of course, football content as well. So we've got the On the Contrary show after this. Then there's an NHL, NFL show. Then later on the day, the MLB Deeper Dive, MLB Live Before Lock. So make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel and like this video so that you are in tune with all the other stuff that we have going on. Today's show is sponsored by PrizePicks. And also, if you guys have not signed up for our baseball tools yet, you're running out of time because the season's almost over. But if you sign up right now using the promo code MLB Strategy Show, you'll get 50% off all of our tools for the first week that you sign up. And that's not just going to be for MLB. So if you sign up right now, that's also going to get you access to our NFL tools, which is going to come in handy with the NFL season underway and week 2 coming up. But just make sure that when you sign up, use that promo code MLB Strategy Show, all one word, all capital letters, because that's what's going to get you 50% off on your first week. So Adam, how are you feeling about tonight's 14-game slate?
Can't go worse than the last couple. So really optimistic. But no, I don't know. I like Fridays this time of year. It just feels like the calm before the storm. Like it's about to be the weekend. There's college football. There's MMA. There's NFL. I don't know. Fridays are just like I like Fridays this time of year.
Yeah, it's 14-game slate, so a lot of options. We got a lot of spots to choose from. Justin Verlander's back, which is of interest to me because I have a bunch of Cy Young futures on him. But let's just jump into the slate because we got all these spots to break down, starting with the Miami Marlins against the Washington Nationals. Jesus Luzardo on the mound for Miami, Josiah Gray for Washington. So 2 young pitchers that have been inconsistent this year, but do have pretty considerable strikeout upside. Luzardo, 27.7% K rate, Josiah Gray, 25.1%. Do either of them stand out to you tonight?
I like Luzardo. Like he's been a solid arm for most of the season. It seems like Miami's been able to fix whatever Oakland couldn't figure out. 27.7% strikeout percentage for Luzardo, 3.5 xFIP. Negative park shift for him going into Washington. He's facing a bunch of right-handed bats, and there is some power there. But overall, not a very good Washington lineup. An $8,700 price tag on Luzardo, I think, is reasonable. Right now, we have him projected for about 15% ownership with about a 13% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. So I think the ownership makes sense there. Obviously, you have a couple of legitimate aces in really good spots that are going to pull some ownership away from him as they should. On the other side for Josiah Gray, kind of surprised how much ownership he's getting right now. It is a good matchup against Miami. He is cheap at 7,600. He's got good strikeout stuff. He also really likes giving up home runs. 25% strikeout percentage this year, very good for that price tag. 10% walk percentage is higher than it should be, 4.5 xFIP, allowing almost 2.5 home runs per 9 innings. A lot of that power has come from left-handed hitters. He hasn't been great against righties, 215 actual ISO, but only a 166 expected ISO there. Lefties, though, have just absolutely lit him up. 329 actual ISO, 269 expected ISO. But when you look at the Miami lineup, there's not really lefties in it. In their projected lineup, you have JJ Bleday and Lewin Diaz being the only 2 lefties in the projected lineup I'm looking at. If that's what the lineup is going to look like, if you're going to get something like that, it does set up really, really well for Gray, who not only does a better job limiting production from righties, but also has nearly a 27% strikeout percentage against righties compared to 23% against lefties.
Yeah, and both these pitchers are young pitchers that for the future, I think both have potential to certainly be top of the rotation guys, but at the same time, too, they've had some of their struggles this year. Luzardo was really good at the start of the year. He's had some stumbles as of late. Josiah Gray, you mentioned all the home runs he's allowing. Are either of these teams going to make it into your lineups as stacks? We do with the Marlins right now with crazy high top value odds.
Probably not going to get to too much just because of the slate size. I'm never opposed to taking some bats against Josiah Gray just because there's so much power upside. And you are getting a positive park shift for the Miami bats. But it just goes back to what I was saying a second ago. There's virtually no left-handed power in this lineup outside of Bleday. So I do like him at 2,200. I think that's a very good one-off. It's somebody where, 150 maxing lineups in Fantasy Cruncher, I probably just won't get that much. But if I were like hand building a lineup and just saying like, oh, what $2,200 hitter do I think is likely to hit a home run, he would certainly be towards the top of the list. So I like him individually. We know Brian Anderson and Garrett Cooper both have power from the right side, so they look fine as well. On the Washington side, I think there's like more people you can name that you like. I mean, you have Lane Thomas, Meneses, Voit. I guess that actually might sort of be it. But I also think Luzardo is better at this point than Josiah Gray. So it's kind of tough for me to single out too much outside of really liking JJ Bleday individually.
So let's move on to the next game then. The Baltimore Orioles against the Toronto Blue Jays. The Orioles kind of starting to fade from the playoff race. Their schedule was really difficult down the stretch. They're fading a little bit.
After they sweep Toronto this weekend, they're going to be right back in it.
All right. How many games back are they right now?
4.5 behind Tampa Bay, 5 behind Toronto.
Yeah, fading a little bit. They're at like they're fair. Their FanGraphs odds making the playoffs aren't all that high. Now they were at one point. They had a pretty realistic chance. But the thing that really does them in, it's just it does to some extent help them to play Toronto because they need to make up the games at this point. But some of the other teams that are in the playoff race just have really easy schedules, and the Orioles just don't going forward. But for today, they've got Jordan Lyles on the mound, and relative to the other pitchers, it's going to be hard to like him. Toronto, we don't have a confirmed starting pitcher. It looks like it's going to be a bullpen game for them. But Toronto, how do you think their offense matches up against Lyles tonight?
I think it's a decent spot. Like, I don't think Lyles is a bad pitcher. I certainly don't think he's a good pitcher. The biggest thing he has going for him is that he does typically give the Orioles innings, which they need because they have so many young pitchers in their starting rotation. But this year, 17% strikeout percentage against righties, 164 expected ISO, 202 expected ISO to lefties. Not many lefties you have to worry about in this lineup, but obviously the righties in this lineup for the most part are all well above average. You're going into Toronto as well, so he's not going to benefit from having a 380-foot wall in left field like he does in his home park. Much easier for right-handed power to hit home runs in Toronto. So I do like this spot for Toronto. Right now, the top stacks tool has them getting 5% ownership with a 5% chance of being the top stack. Not sure if any of that will change because I don't think we have an actual line yet. But either way, I think it's going to set up as a good spot for Toronto. And with it being a 14-game slate, I think that the ownership's going to be kept in check.
And then on the other side of the game, do you have any takeaways from what's likely to be a bullpen game for the for the Blue Jays against the Orioles? It looks like Thomas Hatch is going to be the opener, but not anything confirmed at this point.
No, I mean, I don't think bullpen games are that appealing. I think for Baltimore, it would basically just be like if they're not getting much ownership, they do offer a nice combination of value and upside. You have plenty of power in this lineup. And then once you get past Mullins, Rutschman, Santander, Mountcastle to some extent, everybody starts to be pretty cheap. So in tournaments at low ownership, I think they're okay, but I don't expect them to be a priority for me.
Yeah, and that's pretty much where I'm at as well. You know, maybe something changed in terms of the confirmed starter for the Toronto Blue Jays, but there's no betting line for this game yet, in part because there is no confirmed starter. So more information that we're going to know later when the deeper dive and live before lock rolls around. So moving on to the next game, the New York Mets at home against the Pittsburgh Pirates. And the numbers for Taijuan Walker and Mitch Keller, strikingly similar. Taijuan Walker, 4.07 expected ERA. Mitch Keller, 4.16 expected ERA. Both of them have strikeout rates just south of 20%. I know that Walker has a much easier matchup against the Pittsburgh Pirates, and that is overall one of the easier matchups on the slate, but I generally don't find myself getting to Walker all that often, and he does look like he's going to be pretty popular today. So I think I'd rather look elsewhere for value if we are going to get Walker, like 20% owned on DraftKings, and then on FanDuel right now, Walker is projected for right around 10% ownership at 9,100. It's too much of the field playing Walker for me to really want to get there.
Yeah, the one thing I would mention is that whole price range, or at least the guys in it that I would like to roster, are all getting ownership. So it kind of makes me think that it's just a really useful price range on this slate. And there certainly is a lot of upside to be had, whether it's Josiah Gray, Taijuan Walker, Jack Flaherty at 7K, even Montas at 8,400 who's getting less ownership. So I do think that is just sort of interesting in that price range is getting so much ownership. I think that it might just be a spot that you get to a lot. I do like the matchup for Walker. I think that goes without saying. Good park to pitch in, 2.8 implied run total for the Pirates. So he's going to project pretty well. I think the ownership is there. I think that he's probably a little bit cheaper than he should be as well.
And then the other side, Mitch Keller starting for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And, you know, we had all the narratives coming into the season about how much harder he was throwing in spring training. Ended up being true. His average fastball velocity about 96 miles per hour compared to 94 last year. But in terms of results, it hasn't mattered too much. He's been okay, but the strikeouts haven't been there enough for him to matter for DFS purposes. But how do you rate the Mets as a stack in this spot? Because we have seen Mitch Keller get blown up at times, and the Mets, given some of their price tags, are not overly popular today. They're only projected for 2% ownership on FanDuel and DK.
Yeah, Keller's been really weird this year. The strikeout numbers are down. Like, he used to be somebody that would just get blown up or strike you out. Now the strikeout numbers are down, but only a 119 expected ISO to lefties, 140 to righties in a park that's favorable for pitchers. I like the idea of getting to the Mets just because they're projected for 2% ownership. But what really stands out to me is that we have them with about a 0.5% chance of being the top value stack. And there is pitching that I like on this slate. So I think it's going to be a case most likely where, in theory, I like getting to them, but I think it's going to just end up being difficult for me to actually get those lineups in.
Yeah, that could definitely be the case by the time that we're actually starting to build lineups because, like you said, they are expensive. I don't know that I'm going to be going all the way up to like Justin Verlander today, depending on his pitch count. And I think this is something that's also going to get updated later on is I assume we're going to find out that he's going to be limited today and then his ownership is not going to be nearly what it is now. So I'm probably going to end up on the next tier of pitchers, like the Robbie Rays, Blake Snell type pitchers, who I do think are going a little bit under-owned. But what ends up happening with Verlander is probably going to impact the amount that I'm willing to get to a stack like the Mets. Because if Verlander is limited and not viable, I do think I'm going to have a lot more salary to play with.
Yeah, that's a good point for sure.
All right, so let's move on to the next one, Tampa Bay Rays against the Texas Rangers. And on the mound for Tampa Bay, we've got one of the pitchers who I think does rate out as being a little bit under-owned today, Corey Kluber at home against Texas. His numbers this year, 4.02 expected ERA, 20.5% K rate. I don't think he's that much different from Taijuan Walker, but here's the difference. Kluber is cheaper, and he's picking up about a third of the ownership. I like Corey Kluber as a pivot off of Walker. So before when I was talking about not really liking Walker a ton relative to his ownership, it's because I see pivots that I think are comparable that are just lesser owned, and Kluber is one of them. Is he somebody you could see yourself getting to?
Yeah, I think it's actually interesting right now. We have him projected ahead of Taijuan Walker, which is kind of surprising to me, and it's only by a point. But I think that they're comparable pitchers, like you were saying. I would lean Walker just because of the matchup. But then when you factor in the ownership, you can obviously just kind of debate if Walker or Kluber should be projected higher, but they're more or less the same. And one of them is getting 20% ownership, and the other is getting 7%. So regardless, and is less expensive, like you said. So regardless, Texas is a more difficult matchup than Pittsburgh is, but they're not 3 times more difficult. And case in point, we have Kluber projected higher right now.
Yeah, and in terms of the numbers for Kluber versus Walker, they're crazy similar. Walker 4.07 expected ERA, Kluber 4.02. Strikeout rate slightly higher for Kluber, 20.5% to 19.1% for Taijuan Walker. These are more or less the same pitcher, but Kluber is a bit cheaper and he's picking up so much less ownership. So that's a pivot I like making in large field tournaments. And then in terms of the offenses in this game, we'll talk about Martin Perez in a second. It's just going to be hard for me to prioritize the Rangers or the Rays. This is a pitcher-friendly park. Both these pitchers have been serviceable this year, and both teams also have an implied team total below 4 runs. Do you like either of the stacks in this game?
No, it's pretty tough for me to get to. Like you said, the park, really not favorable. Martin Perez does a good job limiting power. Kluber's fine. There's power in the Texas lineup in particular, but I mean, Kluber this year, a 148 expected ISO to lefties, 164 to righties. There's just nothing that's going to stand out to me here on a 14-game slate.
Yeah, and then on the other side, Martin Perez pitching for the Texas Rangers, and he's maintained having a pretty solid season, 3.48 expected ERA, 21.8% K rate, but I really hardly end up rostering him in DFS. I hardly ever stack against him either, just because he induces so many ground balls. It's hard to find upside against him. But the biggest thing for me that really prevents me from getting him as a pitcher, even though he's been solid, he's always expensive.
Yep.
And so at $9,100 on DK, it's just hard for me to find the strikeout upside there. And then kind of similar thoughts on FanDuel, especially when we can only roster one pitcher there. Like, why do I want to spend up for Martin Perez? I just think there's other guys with a lot more upside relative to price tags.
Yeah, and especially on this slate, like we've already highlighted, I don't know what word I just tried to say, highlighted a few pitchers that are just way less expensive than Perez and have similar strikeout upside. And there's more to come. So it's just really difficult for me to want to pay 9,100. Like, yeah, sure, he's going to be contrarian. You can pay up to be contrarian, but that's just not going to stand out as a spot where I need to do it. But not going to really be interested in the Tampa Bay side either. 110 expected ISO to righties this year. Tough park to hit in, and not even favorable pricing here. You know, Randy Arozarena, 5,700. Wander Franco, 4,700. Yandy Diaz, 4,900. I don't really have any reason to be getting here.
Today's show is sponsored by PrizePicks. If you guys have not signed up at PrizePicks yet, we have a link below. You click on that, you head on over to PrizePicks, and when you make your first deposit, you're going to get up to a $100 bonus there. So there's no reason to not take advantage of this offer. If you're thinking about playing on PrizePicks and haven't yet, make sure you click on the link below because you want to get your $100 bonus. Much better to get the $100 than not get the $100. And they also have a lot of tools over at Stokastic that are going to help you build some winning player prop cards over on PrizePicks. So we've added fantasy point projections specific for PrizePicks. We have our simulations and we simulate out the percentage odds of each individual prop to go over or under. And then, of course, we have our other props as well up on OddsShopper, which could be compared to the lines over at PrizePicks, give you a good idea of what are the best prop to play in the same card over at PrizePicks. So go check that out and make sure to click the link below when you sign up to get your $100 bonus deposit. All right, the next game we have here is the Kansas City Royals against the Boston Red Sox. The Red Sox going up against Jonathan Heasley have one of the highest implied team totals of the entire slate, actually nearly 6 runs for Boston. Heasley, 5.63 expected ERA, strikeout rate only 15.4%. So Boston looks like a team on paper that a lot of people are going to want to get to, and the ownership bears that out because by far, Boston is the chalkiest offense on the slate. What do you make of all the ownership going to the Red Sox?
It's like, it's a situation where I think it's deserved because Heasley is terrible. Like most bad pitchers these days, you can at least make some case like, oh, well, you know, he has this going for him and it's still not, you know, like it's still unlikely they succeed. I mean, it is still unlikely they succeed just because it's baseball, but like Heasley's just consistently one of the worst guys where I just can't even find any redeeming qualities. 184 expected ISO to righties with a 15% strikeout percentage, 211 to lefties with a 15% strikeout percentage. The Red Sox should be getting a lot of ownership. They're probably getting more than they deserve, just given the fact that there are 27 other offenses on the slate. So that might keep me away from them a little bit, but more than happy, you know, in lineups where, you know, if I have contrarian pitching, if I have a contrarian main stack or secondary stack, mixing these Boston bats in because they are going to look really good. And if you're playing cash, I fully expect that you're getting to $5,200 Devers and possibly 4K Verdugo, possibly Bogarts. It's Tristan Casas at 2K flat is basically Vinny Pasquantino the second, just a top hitting prospect that has no business being minimum salary, and now he's in a really good spot. So I really like the Red Sox. It really is just going to come down from a personal exposure standpoint to how easily am I able to balance out the rest of the ownership in my lineups, because looking individually at the projected ownership right now, this isn't a team where you can just, you know, pick off a couple of bats and get them at you know, 3-4% owned. Devers 23%, and then all of Story, Casas, Pham, Bogarts, Wong, Verdugo projected between 11 and 16%. So if you're 5-man stacking them, you're talking about your whole lineup basically being double-digit owned on a 14-game slate.
Yeah, it's where you'd want to play some of those lower owned pitchers, maybe like a Corey Kluber we talked about before, where if you play Boston, but you got Corey Kluber, it's a different enough looking lineup. But if you're just playing a Red Sox stack with the chalky pitchers, it's going to be the most popular build today. And on the other side of the game, I know that you've been a guy who's played a lot of the Royals, but is this too much that the field's getting to the Royals today? Because they are currently projected to be the 4th most popular offense on the slate going up against Michael Wacha. And Wacha's kind of decent. Like, he's not had a terrible year. 4.16 expected ERA, 20.6% K rate, 1.03 whip. So I'm a little confused why the Royals are this popular on a 14-game slate.
I think people might have just like hacked into my model and just started playing the Royals every slate. But it's probably for the same reason that I've been getting to them so much. It's a bunch of value once you get past the Melendez, Witt, Perez part of the order. And then that part of the order gives you a catcher outfield guy in Melendez, third base shortstop in Witt, and one of the better hitting catchers in baseball in Perez. So it's a team where it's just like the sum of their parts is greater than the whole, I guess, whatever the phrase is. It's like the opposite, because it's a really DFS friendly lineup. Even though they haven't had a lot of success this year, they do actually have talent in this lineup. So they're easy to get to. Wacha's, you know, middle of the road pitcher. You're getting him in Fenway Park. If the Royals weren't getting ownership, I would certainly be getting a lot of them. As is, I would guess that I'm still like around the field just because they are so easy to fit into lineups.
Yeah, it's for me at least just relying on our top stacks tool. It looks like a lot of ownership. And I know you've been as high on the Royals as anybody this year, but it's just hard for me to justify them being the fourth highest owned team on a 14 game slate. It doesn't mean they're unplayable. I just don't think I would be around the field. I'd probably look elsewhere for other teams
Yeah,
that are
for
picking
me,
up.
the difference between the top stack score and why I think I'll still get there is just because not only is it the value component, like is going to increase the chances of I don't know how to phrase like you're going to be able to build really good lineups around them just because they're cheap, but then also just the positional flexibility. Like no matter what stack you have, basically, if you need a catcher, you have Melendez Perez. If you need a third baseman or a shortstop, you can throw in Witt. If you need value, you can throw in a 2K flat Pasquantino, who's a legit hitter. So there's just like no matter what you need to balance out your 5-man stack, the Royals can give it to you basically.
Yeah, and that is true. That's been the case for them the entire year, other than when they played in Toronto and it was like, hey, 40% of the lineup is catchers with all the teams suspended. Do you remember when that happened? When they had, I think they had the lineup with, it was 3 of their 9 starters were catchers, and then like 2 out of the 9 were only first baseman. But
Yeah,
that,
and,
that
and they were
series,
facing Kevin Gossman and somehow
yeah.
like won or something.
So that's like notwithstanding, they have had more positional flexibility than any other team in the league. So that point is taken. But let's move on to the next game, the Chicago White Sox against the Detroit Tigers. And Lucas Giolito has gone about 2 months now since he scored over 20 fantasy points, and he's picked up some ownership on recent slates, and he continues to be in really easy matchups. Another simple matchup for him today going up against the Detroit Tigers. Something has to give. Giolito has not had a really good fantasy performance in forever. The Tigers almost never hit right-handed pitching. Adam, how are you going to handle Giolito in large field tournaments where he's going to be somewhat popular today, but then also he just hasn't been able to put together good fantasy performances this year?
Yeah, I mean, he's another guy in this, what's really a loaded mid-range where, yeah, he's had ups and downs this season, but at the same time, he's got the 5th highest strikeout percentage on the slate. The 5th highest strikeout percentage on the slate overall this season. The only pitchers with a higher strikeout percentage are Snell, Ray, Luzardo, and Verlander. Then you get Giolito at 25.3%, 3.65 xFIP, 4.2 FIP. Either one, at least a run better than his actual ERA. Facing the Tigers at 7,800. I still just think the price tag alleviates any concerns that I have about him. The ownership is there, though, so I kind of view him similarly to guys like Josiah Gray, Taijuan Walker, where I'm more than happy to play them, but I don't think they're going to be the guy that I'm just like jamming in. I'm not looking, when I look at Giolito and the price, I'm like, oh, wow, that's a really good price. And then you see the ownership, and it's like, all right, this is just kind of a neutral spot, probably.
Yeah, and that's the key thing also, because for sure, I don't think as much of Giolito this year as it did a couple of years ago when he was an actual Cy Young candidate. But at the same time, too, he's not priced that way anymore.
Right.
Earlier in the year, if you wanted to play Giolito, you still had to pay like $9,400, 95, whatever it is. Now he's just a guy, right? He's just a 7,800 pitcher who, despite some of his struggles allowing runs, is still generating strikeouts. So if this was a pitcher with a different name, because I think people rate so many players based on what their prior expectations were, if this was just whatever pitcher who had underlying stats with expected ERA and FIP in the low to mid 4 range and had a high strikeout rate, I don't think there would be any hesitancy to play them against the Tigers. So for today, I think it's just fine to get to Giolito.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like you'll see it all the time in chat where it's like, oh, I can't play Giolito, he sucks, blah, blah, blah. But you have to keep in mind that the people priced around him, like go find all the consistently good games from Josiah Gray or Taijuan Walker or Corey Kluber or whatever. Like those are the guys you're comparing him to. You're not comparing him to Justin Verlander anymore.
Yeah, and there was a point we had to. We don't anymore. He's not priced that way anymore because he doesn't justify being that price. But in this matchup, he probably should be more expensive. Other side of the game, Matt Manning is pitching, and he's been serviceable this year. 4.1 expected ERA, 18.4% K rate. So it doesn't generate a whole lot of swing and misses. Then he's going up against a White Sox team that just hasn't hit right-hand pitching this well this year, and they're never healthy. So they just have a watered-down version of their offense basically constantly at this point. They're picking up some ownership at 4%. I guess that's okay against Matt Manning, but this isn't a priority offense.
No, and it's still just a difficult spot for me to figure out. Like we know Matt Manning has underlying talent. He was a top-rated prospect. He's had success in the minors, just hasn't really put it together in the majors. One of my favorite things I've seen recently was he had that like monster start against San Francisco, and Eric tweets out some like super condescending tweet about how, and Manning was like 0.5% owned or whatever, and Eric tweets out something about like being happy he was the only person that did the research and was on Matt Manning. And then the next start, Manning comes out and gives up and scores negative 12. And it's just like, yeah, all right, run better, Eric. Glad you did your research though. But yeah, he's like a really difficult pitcher to describe because there is talent there. The Tigers haven't shown the ability to get that out of any of their pitchers outside of Tarek Skubal, basically. But it's there. Like, so I'm never comfortable being like, oh yeah, this guy's total garbage, like take hitters against him. But he really hasn't figured out how to put it together. So far this year in a limited sample in the majors, 153 expected ISO to righties is like 60 points higher than his actual ISO. 156 expected ISO to lefties is like 30 points higher than his actual ISO. He's not striking guys out. To your point, though, the White Sox just really have been disappointing this year as well. So I have some interest in the White Sox. I think the ownership pretty much has it correct. 4% ownership, 5% top stack percentage, 2% top value percentage. They kind of just look like a middle of the road stack. And this doesn't strike me as a slate where I'm going to need to take chances on Manning.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. It's a spot that if you're playing a bunch of lineups, it's going to be in the player pool, but not all much different than the field. It's not something I would have a stand on. Next game, Cleveland Guardians against the Minnesota Twins. This game does have playoff implications. And on the mound for Cleveland, potential for a contrarian pay-up pitching option in Tristan McKenzie. He's been really solid this year, and the strikeouts are there now. So earlier in the year, we saw McKenzie finding a lot of real-life success, but it was at the expense of his strikeout rate. So he had really cut his walk rate, but also cut his strikeout rate. Now he's kept the walk rate in check, and he's generating more strikeouts. The numbers look really good for McKenzie on paper with a 3.85 expected ERA and a 24.8% K rate, and projected for very minimal ownership today. Only 11% over on DK. FanDuel is projected for 5% ownership. Could you see yourself paying up for McKenzie to differentiate some lineups?
Yeah, for sure. He's not somebody, like, I think the price tag is pretty much where it should be. So he's not somebody where I'm looking at it and saying like, oh yeah, I think this is where I'm going to take a massive stand. I don't think I really feel that way about any pitchers today because there's just so many. I would like to be spread out amongst the pitchers because I think there's so many good ones. But I think that he's getting the ownership he deserves. We have him with a 12% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, about 11.5% ownership, 5% chance of being a top 2 value. To put it in context, he's projected about the same as Luzardo. $900 less expensive, but also getting 15% ownership instead of 11.5. So I think it's just another guy where, like, in lineups where maybe you have the Red Sox or you have a relatively popular stack like Kansas City, maybe there you go to McKenzie because he's not unowned, but he's less owned than Snell and right now at least Verlander and Gray and Walker, so you are getting somewhat of a discount there. And then in other lineups where you have a 2% owned stack, you can go to the guys that project a little bit better.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. McKenzie, it's certainly like Red Sox. A good spot to play McKenzie be in a Red Sox stack if he fits in there. Right. Good way to differentiate and look for some lesser owned pitchers. Not going to be looking to stack against him. On the mound for Minnesota, Bailey Ober's expected to start. He's coming off the injured list. I don't really know what to expect from him, although he wasn't particularly good the last time we saw him healthy. His numbers, 4.9 expected ERA this year, strikeout rate right around 20%. Cleveland has a really low implied team total in this spot, barely over 4 runs. We have them projected for 3% ownership. I don't know, with some of the variance involved with Ober coming off the injured list, I think there could be more upside with Cleveland than is going recognized here.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's not a park that I love, and I do think Ober's decent. So far this year in a limited sample, 146 expected ISO to lefties, 243 to righties. If you go back to last year, 216 to righties, 193 to lefties. So, has given up some power, went 4 2/3 in his most recent rehab start, went 4 in the one before that. So he is relatively stretched out. So I don't think this is like a true bullpen game or anything. I think Cleveland's going to be difficult to really prioritize on this slate, but at the same time, Jose Ramirez always gives you a ton of upside, and I'm double checking, but I assume is going to be a lot lower owned than, Ramirez 8% projected ownership compared to Devers 22%. He's $600 more expensive, so I understand why, but he's also not a 3-1 dog to outscore Rafael Devers. And then Steven Kwan's fine. Rosario gives you some upside. Naylor, Gonzalez, Jimenez, 1 through 6. It's a solid enough lineup where for a stack not getting ownership, I do have some interest. But again, it is a 14-game slate, so I kind of don't expect to just be jamming in tons of Cleveland or anything.
All right, so let's move on to another rivalry game. This is the Atlanta Braves at home against the Philadelphia Phillies, and Max Fried on the mound for Atlanta. He's been one of the best pitchers in baseball this year. Probably one of the best pitchers that doesn't get talked about as one of the best pitchers. I guess in part it's because he doesn't have, a 28% strikeout rate or anything, but Max Fried, 2.82 expected ERA, 23.1% K rate, Phillies offense obviously doesn't present the easiest matchup, but still, we've got a pitcher here in Max Fried who's $10,100 projected for 10% ownership over on DK. On FanDuel, Fried 10,400 only projected for 5% ownership. How do you feel about paying up for him when he's had really good results this year, but the strikeout rate hasn't necessarily been there?
I feel like a broken record. It's just like, I think the ownership's about right, 11% there. Like we have him going a little bit under-owned in terms of top two pitcher percentage, but he's also more expensive than a lot of guys, so that balances it out. He's a good pitcher. And one other thing about this slate is there is strikeout upside from a couple of guys. You have Snell, you have Ray, but then, Luzardo 28%, Verlander 26.5%. Everybody else is like 25 or below. So Fried coming in at 23%. There's a lot of slates where it's just like really difficult to get the Fried because, he's on a slate with Strider or Cole or DeGrom or whoever, and he's always going to be expensive because he's a really good real life pitcher. Here, there are still better strikeout pitchers than him, but not quite as much. It's more so the opportunity cost today, I think, comes more so in just the sheer number of quality pitching options that there are. So Fried, I think, is pretty similar to Tristan McKenzie to me, where I think you can get strikeouts for less money, but that's also going to be very obvious to everybody, and that's why you're seeing a bunch of guys in the mid-range getting twice the ownership of Fried. So, fits well into Kansas City stacks, fits well into Boston stacks, San Diego stacks if you're going there. If I'm going to, I don't know, Cleveland, I'm probably going to do something other than Max Fried because other players will project a little bit better.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not going to look to stack against Max Fried either. I don't think I've done that at all this year. So I don't know. I agree. I think the ownership is probably about right. The strikeout rate does make it a little bit prohibitive for me to get to him.
Shout out to Red Skittles for pointing out that Fried and Strider have never been on a slate together. I rescind my statement.
Yeah, you know who else hasn't been on this? Neither is Kyle Wright and Max Fried.
No, well, I use Strider as an example of guy. What I was saying, why a lot of times it's difficult to get the Fried at his salary because he doesn't offer the same sort of strikeout stuff. And I used Strider as an example of a pitcher that he could be on the slate with, even though.
Fair enough. Yeah, true. And probably never will be unless the Braves are shocked when Spencer Strider won't sign a 10-year extension for $3 million.
Right. But it shouldn't be an issue since the rest of their team is being paid 50% market value.
Yeah, probably less than 50% market rate for a lot of them. They've got Ozzy Albies. His contract is 7 years, $36 million. Ronald Acuna, 10 years, $100 million. So just crazy contracts on that team. But other side, Ranger Suarez pitching for producer Mike's Philadelphia Phillies. Ranger Suarez, 3.53 expected ERA, 20% K rate. He's rebounded after a slow start to the year. So what do you make of the Braves going against Suarez? And is he a pitcher you want to play at all?
I don't want to play Suarez. The price tag, especially on this slate, just makes it extremely difficult to get there, sort of like Martin Perez. As far as the Braves go, I don't like the matchup, but I do like that they're getting 2% ownership. They kind of look like the Mets to me, though, where I like the idea of getting there. I don't know how easy it's going to be to actually build a strong lineup around them, although you do still have plenty of mid-range pitching that you can get to. You have just a lot of right-handed power in this lineup. Suarez has only allowed a 105 expected ISO to righties since the start of last year, 119 so far this year, but he's only striking them out 20% of the time. I'm never going to be upset about getting low-owned Acuna, Swanson, Riley, in particular, d'Arnaud. You can play Olsen in there as well if you're stacking. So
5 to 6, because there isn't that much time left until the playoffs. And by the way, I choked on some water before, and I've not been able to get it out of my throat for the last 5 minutes. So every time Adam starts talking, I have to mute myself and start coughing. But that aside, Justin Verlander, what are you expecting out of him in terms of innings and pitch count in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of just a guessing game. My immediate inclination is 90-ish pitches. I kind of just assume he's going to go 5-6 innings. They're probably not going to have him overly exert himself, but I also don't think he's out of shape or anything. It was a calf injury, and it's been 2 weeks since he pitched. So if he needed
It was funny. We were having a conversation, and then Adam said to me, "Is Mike gone?" I was like, "Oh yeah, Mike is gone." And then it hit me for a second. I was like, "Wait, are we not doing a show now?" I mean, we only have like 10 minutes left at this point, so yeah. Are we live right now? Hey guys, can you hear me? All right. Do we have a video also now? All right. Hey guys, we're back. So we left off. We're just talking about Justin Verlander. I think that's probably where we cut off. So we need more. Yeah, we just need a little bit more information on what Justin Verlander's pitch count's going to look like. But on the other side of the game, Adrian Martinez starting for the Oakland A's. He has not been good this year. He's a really difficult matchup against the Houston Astros. So the Astros do look to me like one of the offenses I want to be paying up for. Reasonable ownership at 6%. Adam, assuming everything works right here, Houston Astros, a team you're interested in paying up for.
Yeah, if you can get there. They are getting, I think it's notable, they are getting a bit more ownership than teams like the Mets that and Atlanta that they're similarly priced to. So like always happy to get to Houston, but I think it's likely that if I am able to pay up, I'm going to just get to Atlanta and the Mets at lower ownership. They don't have quite the same implied run total as Houston, but still very, very high upside offenses. That being said, though, no issue in looking to Houston against Martinez.
All right, so let's move on to, let's see, a few games left. We'll just go through them as quickly as we can to finish out the show here. Milwaukee Brewers against the New York Yankees. So Frankie Montas, a little bit earlier, you alluded to him as being a potential contrarian pitching option you like to get to. And there's clearly a whole lot of talent in Frankie Montas. His results have just been not quite as good with the Yankees as they were with the Oakland A's, which more than anything, I could just be attributed to he's making home starts at Yankee Stadium as opposed to Oakland. But Frankie Montas still is a 23.7% K rate. He's facing a Milwaukee Brewers team where there are strikeouts to be had. So what do you make of the matchup he has against the Brewers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a dangerous matchup because they're in Miller Park or whatever, American Family Field, American First, whatever, Family First Field, whatever it is. There's a lot of power in the Milwaukee lineup, but there are also strikeouts for him to get as well. Really, he's just another guy where we have him projected slightly behind Josiah Gray, slightly ahead of Taijuan Walker, but he's getting not a lot of ownership, 5% ownership, 9% chance of being a top two pitcher. So it's not somebody that I expect to take like a massive stand on, but it's also somebody where you kind of right now, at least we have the field projected to choose their like 4 or 5 favorite guys out of this group of very similar pitchers. And Frankie Montas isn't one of them. So in lineups where maybe you're going to Houston or you're going to the Red Sox, Montas makes sense.
Yeah, and then in terms of the Milwaukee Brewers against him, this is an offense that they certainly have some power upside, and Montas has had his struggle since coming to the Yankees. So the Brewers, one of the lowest owned teams on the entire slate, actually projected for only about half a percentage of ownership. Clearly, this isn't the highest probability stack, but they should be more than 0.6% owned.
Yeah, I agree. 185 expected ISO to lefties this year for Montas stands out in particular. Yelich's price tag and Telez's price tags both have come up a bit. So not getting the same cheap prices you were recently on Milwaukee, and that probably is contributing to the ownership as well. And then, Adames is over 5K. Renfro's pretty expensive. So it's not a very easy team to get to, I don't think, relative to what they're giving you, but they're also just not getting any ownership. So it's another team where, at the very least, I like the idea of mixing in some of their power bats as, one-offs or two-mans.
Yeah, and then on the Milwaukee side, Adrian Hauser is going to be on the mound. He's been a very mediocre pitcher this season. 4.67 expected ERA, 16.2% carry. It's actually a little bit below average, and he has a very difficult matchup against the New York Yankees offense. I'm a little surprised we don't have the Yankees projected for more ownership today. I guess maybe just part of it is because of, once again, those price tags, but it's not like the Yankees are crazy expensive outside of the top hitters. Aaron Judge individually is a hitter who basically always picks up ownership at this point, but 5-man stacks of the Yankees, I think, are pretty reasonable to get to.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, talking about why I can't turn my trophy into a chain. Um, Yeah, I mean, Hauser is just kind of a guy. He doesn't give up a ton of power, but he doesn't get strikeouts either. Good park to hit in. Reasonable 4.2 implied run total for the Yankees. Reasonable, especially for this slate, because there is so much good pitching. So I think that does make them look a little bit better. We have them getting about 4% ownership, 5% chance of being the top stack. They do offer a little bit more value than these other high upside teams as well. The bottom of their order is pretty weak right now, so that's less than ideal. But being able to get, Judge, Stanton, Torres, and then just kind of offset that salary with Cabrera, Gonzalez, or any pairing basically of the guys at the bottom of their order is pretty appealing, and I think they look pretty good.
All right, so let's move on to the next one here in the interest of trying to power through all these games. And this one, we don't have a pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds, no confirmed starter, so we're going to need more information on that end. But Jack Flaherty pitching for the Cardinals at home against Cincinnati, and Flaherty's results have not been good to this point. I still think he's a pitcher with arm talent. I still think he has upside. He's fairly cheap today considering the matchup against the Reds. We've seen a bunch of slates lately where Flaherty has been popular. What do you make of him against Cincinnati considering the struggles he's had this season?
I mean, I still think he looks good here at the price tag. It's kind of the Giolito thing where it just offsets a lot of my concerns. He threw 87 pitches last time out, 91 the start before that. Didn't have great results, and they were both pretty favorable matchups. 16.5 DraftKings points against Washington, negative 0.8 against Pittsburgh. So, still certainly capable of having bad starts, but he's 7K. We know that he's got a lot of talent. Not much of a sample size at all this year, but he's been just flat out awful. So it's certainly not a safe spot, but I like the matchup, and I think that the 7K price tag discounts a lot of the issues, especially because he's only getting like 14% ownership as well. He's a pitcher that if he wasn't having the issues that he was this year, and you priced him at 7K against the Reds, this guy would be like 70% owned normally.
Which is kind of what we've seen recently, because some of the recent starts he's been crazy popular. I know I've played him on some of those slates, and it just hasn't really gone well. Last one in particular, last start against the Pittsburgh Pirates for Jack Flaherty, 5 innings, 0 strikeouts, 4 walks, 2 home runs allowed. That was a pretty concerning start overall for the year. He has 14 walks, just 12 strikeouts. He's also only made 5 starts, so it's really hard to know where he's at right now. But just considering the track record of Jack Flaherty, I do expect he's going to turn it around at some point. And where I want to bet on him to turn it around is when he's cheap in a good matchup and people aren't playing him.
Yeah, exactly. To me, it's kind of like you're not going to win tournaments typically anyway. And so it's kind of like I'm not going to be afraid to take risks, especially when the potential payoff is that you just get the start where Jack Flaherty figures out how to pitch again.
All right.
And it's not like his velocity is down or anything.
Yeah.
Averaging like almost 94 miles an hour on his fastball in both of his starts since he came back from injury.
I really just think it's rust. It's not like you said, the velocity is there. I think he just needs more reps. He needs to pitch more innings, get more pitches in, and really just figure out his location and get more comfortable with his pitches and whatnot. But 3 games left, and we've got 6 minutes to do it. Do us a favor, guys. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel right after this. NFL on the Contrary is coming up. Los Angeles Angels against the Seattle Mariners. I'm a little surprised to see Robbie Ray not picking up more ownership in this spot because he's a 28% K rate. And there just aren't that many pitchers at the high end outside of Justin Verlander, who I look at as being like, oh, this is the guy who's in a great spot and has great strikeout stuff. So I look at the ownership that we have right now on Robbie Ray, only 8%. That seems really low for a matchup against an Angels team that strikes out a ton.
Yeah. They don't, I mean, the one negative is this version of the Angels doesn't strike out as much. Like you have Fletcher in there. You don't have Jared Walsh in there anymore. You're going to probably have Matt Duffy in the lineup. So they don't strike out as much, but there are still strikeouts to be had. Ray has the second highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 28%, 3.47 xFIP. We have him as the second highest projected pitcher. I'm with you. I don't like with all the pitching on this slate. I don't think it should be one of those slates where Ray's getting 40% ownership or anything, but I have no idea why he's only getting 8.
Yeah, and that's kind of been the norm lately in Robbie Ray starts. There's been in decent matchups. He has been like 30, 40, 45% owned. I know a lot of them have been smaller slates, but still, I think he warrants being more than this. Of all the pay-up pitchers today, of the ones that project like pretty high for us in top 2 pitch odds, he's by far the lowest owned. So I don't think Robbie Ray against the Angels should not have less ownership than Max Fried against the Phillies, just based on strikeout stuff. So if this is going to hold until later in the day, I do like paying up for Robbie Ray to be contrarian, and I'm not going to be looking to stack against him with the Angels.
So I will clarify. I know why we have him projected, or a potential reason we have him projected for 8% ownership. A popular competitor has him projected to be the 14th highest scoring pitcher on DraftKings. I don't know how that happens, but if that holds, then yeah, he's probably not going to get that much ownership, and I'll gladly get more.
Yeah, so that is something that I had not taken note of because I hadn't looked around. But yeah, if somebody's just projecting crazy low, then anybody's using that projection source is just not going to get to Robbie Ray. So that would probably be the reason for it. And then starting for the Angels, Michael Lorenzen's on the mound, a man who Eric Lindquist once declared the best hitting pitcher in the history of baseball. Michael Lorenzen, 4.31 expected ERA, only a 17.5% K rate. Seattle Mariners on the other side, they've had a pretty solid offense this year. They are projected to be one of the more popular offenses on the slate. So maybe they don't quite warrant as much ownership as they're getting, but they are definitely an offense to get to.
Yeah, Lorenzen, one of the weaker pitchers on this slate for sure. It just, it stands out even more when you get to a pitcher like this after you talk about just all of the like number 1 and number 2 pitchers that are on this slate. So you're getting Seattle in a positive park shift. You're getting them against one of the weaker pitchers on the slate. They're projected for 9% ownership, but about a 7% chance of being the top stack, 5% chance of being the top value stack. And that really stands out when, if you just sort by top stack percentage and go down the top stacks tool, it's like 3%, 2%, 2%, Mariners at 5, less than 1, 3. Like there's nobody, you get down to Kansas City at like number 10 before you get a team that's offering more value than the Mariners. So that stands out as well. I really like getting to them here. There's just a lot of things working in their favor. Park shift, a lot of talent, reasonable pricing. Lorenzen has been solid at limiting right-handed power this year with a 108 expected ISO, 188 to lefties, not nearly as good. But when you're talking about Julio Rodriguez in particular from the right side, but also, Ty France has power, Haniger has power, Suarez has power. I would prefer if this lineup had more lefties, but the righties are really good. It sets up as a good spot for my boy Cal Raleigh as well.
All right, so let's quick kind of fire through these last 2 games. Padres, Diamondbacks, simple as this. Blake Snell's pitching for the Padres. He's had a really good season, 31.3% K rate, the highest on the slate. I like getting to Blake Snell. Madison Bumgarner's pitching for the Arizona Diamondbacks. He's been terrible this year. I like stacking against Madison Bumgarner. I know that we saw the Padres offense struggle last night as being a popular team. This is a way easier matchup against Madison Bumgarner as opposed to last night where they're going up against one of the top pitching prospects in baseball. So would you agree with this, Adam? We want to play Blake Snell. We want to stack against Madison Bumgarner.
Yeah, it all just, comes down to ownership within individual lineups. But, obviously Bumgarner has the name value, but if he were coming up through the minor leagues right now, he would not be as highly rated a prospect as Jameson was last night. Certainly a better matchup. He struggles with righties in particular. You have basically nothing but right-handed power in this lineup with the exception of Juan Soto, who is just great in general. The pricing isn't even that expensive for the most part. So I like getting to the Padres as long as the ownership doesn't get too crazy. Right now they are getting basically double the ownership of almost every other team on the slate that isn't named Boston or Seattle. But it's a spot where I like the matchup for them. I don't love targeting Arizona in general because they have been more difficult to strike out recently. They have called up a bunch of top prospects, but Blake Snell still has the highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 31.3%. That's 3 points higher than Robbie Ray. 3.34 xFIP. You know what you're getting with Snell. It's a relatively volatile pitcher that will walk too many guys. And if he gets unlucky on balls in play, things can get pretty ugly. But that's also the case for everybody. So he has the strikeout stuff to really just give you a game that you need. He's only getting 18% ownership right now at 9,400. That's going to look pretty good.
And then the final game, we've got Dustin May on the mound for the Dodgers, Logan Webb on the mound for the Giants, game being played in San Francisco. Dustin May, I think, is another pretty interesting contrarian spend-up option at pitcher just based on his talent and his stuff. Dustin May might have the best just stuff of anybody in baseball. His fastball makes no sense, like 99 miles per hour and is moving like half a foot to like 10 inches every pitch he throws. Dustin May's numbers this year, 3.88 expected ERA, 23.3% K rate. We know the San Francisco pitcher friendly of a park that is. Right now, we've got Dustin May projected for 3% ownership at 8,200. Before we were talking about guys to pivot off Taijuan Walker with, I brought up Corey Kluber. Dustin May to me is also another really good pivot off of Taijuan Walker. He should not be a tenth of the ownership.
Yeah, he's another one. So he's $200 more than Walker. We have him a 1.5 higher than Walker. We have him a point behind Giolito, but getting, 1/5 the ownership or 1/6 the ownership. We have him slightly ahead of Kluber, slightly ahead of Gray. I don't know why. It's not that I have a problem with the guys that are getting ownership, but I think May should be getting more as well. 23.3% strikeout percentage so far this year is solid. He is walking too many guys, but a good park to pitch in. And like you were saying, he's certainly towards the top of the list of guys that his stuff does not match the results that we've gotten overall in the major league so far. I think sooner than later, you see Dustin May just really turn into a very legit pitcher.
And then finally, just really quick thoughts, we've like 30 seconds. Any opinion on the Dodgers going up against Logan Webb in a really pitcher-friendly park when the Dodgers are projected for no ownership?
I mean, the Dodgers at no ownership is always fine, but you also have the Braves at no ownership on this slate. You have the Mets at no ownership. So if you get to the Dodgers in some lineups, cool, but I'm not going out of my way to target Logan Webb in San Francisco, I don't think.
All right, that does it for us, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Stick around. NFL on the Contrary is up next. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. See you guys all later.